The point of this video is to create an environment that we can use in our Anaconda ecosystem that allows us to use the MySQL connector Python that some folks were having trouble installing under Python 3.8. So toward that end, let's start by bringing up Anaconda Navigator. So I'm going to show a graphical way of performing this environment creation. Once it's created, if you're used to using a terminal window to bring up Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, that's perfectly feasible as well. So we're in the Anaconda Navigator home window, and we're on the Home tab over here on the left-hand side. Right? And we're going to click on Environments. And in my environment, I've got the base or root environment, which is the default environment when you do an install. I also have a custom environment that allows me to do some other development, but we're going to create a brand new environment. Okay, so we're going to go down here to the button in the lower left of the second panel and click on the Create. That brings up a dialog window for Create New Environment. We'll call the new environment CS181. You can call it whatever you like. Now notice that I've got the Python packages selected here because I'm not interested in adding the pieces relative to R. If I needed to do both, I could select that. And under the Python, I can select 3.8, 3.7, 3.6, 3.5, or 2.7. We want 3.7 because that's the one compatible with MySQL connector Python. I then click on Create, and it'll think about it for a little bit and start putting together the set of base packages. When Anaconda Navigator creates a new environment like this, it starts with a pretty minimal set. So at this point, we can see in the right-hand pane under the installed packages that we've got just a few things in here. Right? So our next step is that we need to add some packages to this. Right? To do that, what I'm going to do is on the upper left of this panel, instead of installed, I'm going to say show me what is not installed. Now there are a lot of things that are not installed. Okay, we've got literally hundreds. It's got 8,320 packages available. So we're going to use the search package in the upper right of this right-hand panel in order to look for the things that we need. We're going to start with Pandas. All right, so if I do a search for Pandas, then I see Pandas come up in the window, version 1.1.2, and I will click that. All right, that's the only one I need under that search. Next, I'm going to change my search to be LXML. And I'll see that package and I will select it. Now don't worry about the fact that when we do a new search, we're not seeing the old packages that we've selected. If you take a look down here, it shows you that there are two packages selected, and it will continue to accumulate and remember the packages that we've selected. The next search I'm going to do is for SQL Alchemy. SQL Alchemy is actually part of the SQL packages that would normally be by default. We didn't have to install that, but creating a new environment, we do. Okay. Then the next thing I'm going to do is look for the MySQL. I'll just do MySQL and we'll get a whole bunch of things. And there's the MySQL. We're going to do the MySQL connector C and the MySQL connector Python. We do not need these others. These are our the MySQL here is actually to run within this environment the entire relational database management system. We don't want that. And the rest of these below are other drivers that we're also not interested in. To support the local file system, we want SQLite. Oh, I take that back. That's already part of what SQL Alchemy is going to give us. Another thing that we're going to need for the fourth unit of this class is curl. And so we're going to actually select the curl package, the lib curl, and the py-curl. All right, so there are 3 under that. Then we're going to look for things associated with Jupyter. And so in particular, we want Jupyter Lab. We want, we're going to have to scroll down here a little bit. We want Notebook. Where is it? We want NB Convert. We want NB Format, and now there's Notebook. Okay, so we've selected 4 things in this particular search. If from what you've done before you really like Spider and want that to be part of this environment, that's perfectly fine. Search for and select Spider. All right. At this point, I've got 13 packages selected. So I'm going to use the X to go out of any search, and then instead of not installed up here, I'm going to look at selected as a way of double checking the set of things that that we just went through. These are the packages that we want installed in this environment: curl, Jupyter Lab, libcurl, LXML, MySQL connector C, MySQL connector Python, NB Convert, NB Format, Notebook, Pandas, py-curl, Spider, and SQL Alchemy. Now these are the high-level packages. Each of these have their own dependencies, but we don't have to worry about those. The package manager will say, from these 13, I'm going to figure out everything else and the version required of everything else that's needed in order to support these 13. All right, so at this point, if you have these 13 packages under selected, then you can click on apply. And it's going to go to its online database and figure out what all of those dependencies that we just talked about are, and then come up with a full list of the packages that will be installed into the CS181 environment. That took a few minutes, but not too long. And so you can see the ones that we selected as the first 13. And then starting at 14, we have names of packages with an asterisk in front. These are all the dependent packages that are required. We click apply again, and it will go ahead and start bundling all of that up, downloading it from the internet, and installing it into this environment. One of the really nice things about these environments is that this is not touching your base or root environment that you had before. And so if there were some side projects or other things you were doing in that root environment, you're not disturbing any of those at all. I'm going to pause the recording here while it goes through the installation of packages. This could take a few minutes. We will see in the bottom here that this thermometer bar will stop, blinking on the new things that it's adding, and when that quiesces, then we'll be able to take a look at the environment. Okay, so I'll pause and be back in a moment. Okay, my install is done, and the set of packages that it was showing me, it was installing down in the lower part of this right-hand panel are done. And so I'm still selected. If you can see this, I'm selected on the CS181 environment, which is the environment that we're building. And now instead of selected, we're going to go back to installed, and we'll be able to see the total 181 packages, in my case here, of packages that are available. All right, once we have that, I'm still selected on CS181. I'm going to click on this right-hand arrow, and it's going to show me that it can open up a terminal window that is within this environment. right? Because we still have the step of the IPython SQL that we have to use the pip command to install. So I'm going to open a terminal, and I know that I'm in the CS181 environment because at the beginning of each command line, in parentheses, it tells me what environment I'm in. And so if I'm in the CS181 environment, then the time has come to do a pip install IPython-SQL. Hit return, and it's installing that, and it's installing that in our CS181 environment. At this point, our environment is set up just the way that we want. Okay, and so we can close that terminal window, and now in Anaconda Navigator, I'm going to click on Home. And you can see that anytime I'm in Home, I can select which environment I'm interested in. So if I needed to go back and forth between environments, I could go back to base root if I wanted. The versions of things within that environment might change. The version of Notebook, the version of Jupyter Lab might change. I go back to CS181, and when it highlights again, see, Jupyter Lab is actually version 2.2.6 in my CS181 environment. If I click on Launch for Jupyter Lab, I'm going to be able to bring up Jupyter Lab the same way that I normally do, the same way that I know. And it turns out in Jupyter Lab, I'm at the same notebook that I was in our in-class practicum today. All right, so in particular, I can then execute these cells. Now, the one thing that's going to be a little bit different for us here is that in order to do this, I need to be on the VPN, and I'm not right now. But if I go onto the VPN, I'm going to disrupt this video recording. So I'm going to leave that step for you. That when you're watching this, or after you've watched this and got the environment set up and you want to check it out, then you need to get on the VPN before you run through these steps. So I'll run through the steps, but not actually execute the connection to the database server. And so I do my imports, I define my functions, I've already got my independent client. We're supposed to set our user credentials. So I right click on creds.json and do an open with to the editor. And the two things that I need to change are within the MySQL dictionary, changing the value for user and the value for pass. For me, I'm going to use my example, which is student_J1, and then the same thing for pass. For you, it's going to be whatever your login at Denison is without the @denison.edu, and the password is going to be the same. Right? This is not the same as your LDAP password, as your single sign-on password. Once I've got that, I can save my creds.json and go back to my getting started. And when I execute this cell, I can see I've got the correct server, I've got the correct username, and I've got the correct password. We've already done the steps for the package double check because we, at the time we created the environment, installed MySQL connector, and then in that separate step, we did the pip install of IPython SQL. Even if you were successful at doing the pip install IPython SQL in class this morning, you will need to do that again in this new environment, right? Because the two environments are completely separate. I load the extension for SQL Magic. And if I take a look and execute the connection string cell here, I see a connection string of MySQL plus MySQL connector, student J1 at hadoop.mathsci.denison.edu/book. yours will look the same except for the username and password, which appear in these two parts right here. Right. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to actually establish a connection to the server because we're not on the VPN. The last step I want to show you in this tutorial is what if you launch Jupyter Lab from a terminal window. Okay, so I'm going to shut down this Jupyter Server instance, Jupyter Lab Notebook instance, and close the window. And I'll close Anaconda Navigator. And what I'm going to do is bring up a terminal window. And in that terminal window, sorry, I'm going to have to clear some stuff out here. And I'll bring up a new instance of a terminal window. If you take a look at this command line, you can see that I am currently in the base environment. Right? I need to be in the 181 environment, whatever you name that environment. We do that by, at the command line, saying Conda activate CS181, and you'll type in Conda exactly as I have here, activate exactly as I have here, and the CS181 is whatever you named the environment when we created it in Anaconda Navigator environments. And once I've done that, it's going to say CS181 as the prefix to each of these command lines. At that point, I can type in Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook, whichever way you choose to activate, and it will come up. And lo and behold, I am now able to execute Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebook the same as I always did. Okay, so that should create the environment that you need in order to have all of the pieces that we need for our SQL unit for the next 3 weeks, as well as some of what we're going to do downstream. Hopefully this will solve those folks who are on Python 3.8 and were not able to get the MySQL connector Python package installed because of that. Have a good day.